Normally I don't like to make videos that are centered around myself, and I don't know if I would really call this a self-centered video, but today's my birthday, and I turned 31. It is September. It is May 21st, 2023, and I was born May 21st, 1992, so each year for my birthday I like to just kind of sit down and reflect on my life and just the things that I'm thankful about and what I hope for the future. Like I said, I was born in 92, and in 1996, I was adopted by my loving family, who basically raised me throughout foster care. One reason or another, there were complications with my biological family, although I am connected with them, and I love them, but I was raised basically in foster care, but by the same people since day one. So my family has been my family since day one, which is a true blessing, and that's not very typical for people who are in foster care. So when I was younger, my mother was pushing me on the swing, and she noticed that I wasn't breathing right, and she said, "I think he needs to go to the hospital," to my dad, and so we did, and they said, "You're lucky he got here when he did, because if he didn't, he would have died, because he has congestive heart failure." Had a hole in my heart. I think it was like this, about this big, roughly. So they ended up treating it, and it got better, and I've been alive ever since. So that's one of the first instances of God intervening in my life to save it, and I'm very grateful to Him for it. I was raised in a Christian home. I love the Lord and with all my heart, mind, and soul, and it motivates all that I do. But it's been up and down over the years, as it has been for anybody else, but I'm very thankful to have a family that has always loved me from day one, which is becoming a rarity as time goes on. I've had such a big family, and my immediate family. I had two sisters, or have two sisters technically. I have a foster sister, and then I have a sister that was my parents' biological daughter, who was the firstborn. So she took as much part in raising me as anybody else did. And then my older foster sister, her and I were very close. We did a lot of stuff together. A lot of my tastes in media and things like that were shaped by the years that I spent with her, watching TV, playing video games, listening to music, all of that. Same with my older sister. But it's been a good life. I mean, we did a lot of stuff. We weren't, we weren't the most extravagant or rich family. We were just a smaller, middle-class Rhode Island family. And then when I turned 16, we moved from Rhode Island to Pennsylvania, and I think that's when life really started to challenge me, because I went through a lot of discouragement and a lot of pain trying to adjust living in a new area. I was excited about living somewhere new, but I didn't realize how difficult it would be to try to reestablish things over again. I didn't realize that. And I didn't have a lot of friends to begin with at home. I had maybe 2 or 3 at any given time. But when I moved here to Central PA, I struggled. I struggled big time. I saw a lot of darkness and was not prepared for it. But my faith grew bigger than it had ever been when I was in Rhode Island. It grew leaps and bounds. I was in the Word more. I was praying, and I was motivated to do so many more things than I was motivated to do back home, and that was a blessing in and of itself. Life just looked different, and there was change, and I was never one for change. I've never been one for change. I don't really like change. Change is one of those things in life that is always difficult. It's always a struggle. If you're somebody younger who's watching this, change, it happens, but it's not always easy, and I understand that. And it could be changes in family dynamics and locations of where you live, but you got to keep going, because life was never meant to stay the same. I'm a very nostalgic fart. I call myself a nostalgic old fart, even though I'm only 31, because I listen to 90s music, watch TV shows from the late 90s, early 2000s, play video games from the 90s, 80s, and early 2000s. I'm not much of a new guy when it comes to anything other than maybe social media and YouTube, but I'm very old-fashioned in that sense. But there is stuff that's meant to change. That stuff is all fine. You can appreciate the stuff that you grew up with and love it. Nobody's saying you can't, but things do change, and times do change, and you have to choose how you want to approach it. I'm not saying everybody needs to accept everything that the world does when it changes, because believe you me, there are plenty of things that the world is doing that I believe are objectively wrong and will not go along with, no matter what anybody says. Believe you me, I am incredibly outspoken about some of the more flawed aspects of the world today. Trust me, when I made my late 90s, early 2000s video, it was to talk about how far we've fallen as a culture. So I don't believe that change for the sake of change is good, but change does happen, and it doesn't have to be all bad. You can make a lot of good out of it by learning from the past, absolutely. And I've learned a lot from my past. I mean, not everything in my past was perfect. You know, I dealt with a lot of struggle. I had to overcome a lot of personal adversity within my life. None of it came from my family, because my family was always wonderful and supportive. It all came from the world around me and navigating the world around me and growing in that world around me. You know, as much as I opine for the late 90s, early 2000s, there were difficulties even back then. There were many difficulties that, you know, mostly when I praise that era, I praise how the overall culture was and the media of that culture for the most part. It wasn't all great. There was a lot of garbage, but there was a lot better stuff, especially if you were a kid. But as a 31-year-old adult, one of the things that I've learned is that not only is life difficult, but people can often be cruel. People can often be self-centered, self-absorbed, and into themselves, to where it's being fed by everybody around them and by social media. And I almost fell into that trap several times over the years. When I was a teenager, when I was 16, and had just moved to Central PA, social media was just on the rise. I was on Facebook all the time, Twitter all the time. I was using all of that, and it wasn't always healthy, but it was the only outlet I had to communicate with people. And I learned very quickly a lot of very important lessons about interacting with people online. I learned very quickly. I learned you can't always trust what you hear. People make up a lot of sob stories for sympathy. People aren't always as friendly as they claim to be if you differ with them on issues. I learned all of these sorts of lessons, and I'm all the better for it, for sure. But it does bother me that we've got younger generations who are perpetually online. A lot of my friends, I haven't started any families. I'm still mostly on my own, and I see a lot of people starting families, and I do worry for the next generations of kids coming up, because a lot of them are going to be perpetually online, and they're going to have to learn to navigate that online space that is constantly threatening them at every turn. A lot of lessons that I had to learn in my teenage years and in my 20s, a lot of them just may not learn, and they're going to be on a lot earlier than I was. So I would definitely say be careful of that. As far as my own personal future goes, you know, the sky's the limit. I've got a lot of stuff that I want to achieve. I've got a lot of stuff that I want to do, but I mean, may God's will be done no matter what I achieve, no matter what I accomplish, no matter what I don't accomplish. That's my goal, is to honor the Lord in everything that I do. That is my philosophy. That's been my philosophy since I was a teenager, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. I don't care what the world does. I don't care what the world says is right. I don't care what the world says is wrong. I care what God says is right and wrong, and I care what God says about other people and how to treat other people, how to love other people. That's what matters to me, is God and His Word above everything else. And that's my biggest takeaway from my past several years, is that God is my core. Without Him, whenever I have fallen away from God, I've been doing worse. I've fallen into depressions and discouragement and felt like it's not worth waking up today. And, you know, even asking the Lord, just let it all be done tomorrow. You know, that's the darkest that I've ever gotten. And frankly, it's just because I chose to look in the wrong direction. I chose to look at the constant state of the world, as opposed to looking to God, who has sustained His people for generation after generation, no matter what evil and chaos has been in the surrounding world. God has sustained my life. Like I said earlier, He saved my life, you know. He provided opportunities throughout my life. He provided me a good home. He provided me good education and food to eat and job opportunities and, you know, a car to drive, a roof over my head, a loving family who has always stood by me. He's provided me all of these different things, and I can't wake up and look at life and say that I'm not grateful for it. You know, I tend to downplay my birthday every year. You know, it's not that big of a deal to me as it was when I was, say, younger. I'm just like, it's just another year of life. I don't want to make a big deal about it. But what I am grateful for every year is the opportunity to keep going, because a lot of people haven't. I lost a lot of family members in the past couple of years, many of them older, but it's just a reminder that this thing doesn't go on forever. This life is not eternal. Eternal life is in heaven, or unfortunately in hell, if that's the path that you end up on. And I want the path to be, number one, in heaven, but I want to also be thankful for the limited time I have on earth to be able to spend with my friends and family and making new friends and new opportunities. The sky's the limit as far as life is concerned. I've got several years of life yet. I'm still, by most accounts, young. And earlier in the year, I had a lot of panic about aging and about getting older and about life passing me by, and feeling like by the time, life really tries to get going, it'll be too late and I'll be too old. But that's not the truth. I look back at my 20s and say I feel like I really wasted it, because I wasn't really working till I was 29. I was at home playing games, occasionally making videos when I was doing more Let's Plays and things. I wasn't really doing what would be considered popular for most 20-year-olds. I was doing the bare minimum and just kind of trying to walk the straight and narrow. I wasn't partying. I wasn't hooking up with several women. I wasn't doing any of that. And I don't regret not doing those things. I never had any desire to do those things. When I was old enough to drink, I didn't want to drink. I didn't have my first thing of alcohol till I started working selling alcohol. And even then, it was very little. I always stuck to the non-alcoholic stuff because the history of a history of alcohol abuse in my family throughout many generations, and I didn't want to continue that chain. And so I try to stay away from it as much as possible, because I know I'm susceptible to it on multiple sides, on my biological and my non-biological sides. So I try to keep the straight and narrow, and I don't want to shame anybody who consumes alcohol. There's nothing wrong with consuming it. It's just very easy to abuse and get your life caught in a horrible situation as a result of doing it. And I've seen it with so many people. People who mean a lot to me. I've seen them struggle and had to use that as an example. So I got to be cautious out there, and that's how I lived throughout my 20s, was being cautious. And when I got to January of this year, I felt like, oh geez, maybe I wasted my 20s, because even though I wasn't doing all the deviant stuff, and I'm glad I wasn't, I didn't feel like I was doing anything productive. But the truth was, as I prayed about it, I was doing stuff productive. I was doing what God wanted me to do. I was living the life God wanted me to live. I can't sit here and live life with regrets if I didn't do anything genuinely wrong. I got to accept where my life was at and what it meant. And my 30s, I'm hoping to achieve more. I'm hoping to do what God wants me to do, but I'm hoping to produce more content, to have great job opportunities, and for new doors to open up, and to be proactively pursuing different things. And that's what I'm going to try to do. Make the most of the life that I do have and the time that I have with my family. My folks are getting older. They're in their early 70s now, and they're starting to slow down in different areas, and I love them to death. So I want to spend time with them when I can, even if what we do looks different than what we were doing years ago. I do appreciate the small moments that we have together. But life is changing. It's presenting a lot of challenges for them, and I want to do my best to help them through some of those challenges as I'm able. So there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to pray about. There's a lot to, my mind is all over the place, and it has been for months, but I'm praying for my mind to just not get overwhelmed, and for me to be able to push forward and do what is necessary for me to do. And hopefully that's to be a blessing to those around me, and to love the Lord, and to serve the Lord, and to love and serve people, and to create good content, and to just be the type of person I was meant to be, and not live with terrible regrets for not doing things the way that maybe I wanted them to be done. So that's the summation of my life as of 31. It's been a good one. I can't look back on it and say it was filled with all sorts of trauma or horrible things that other people have had to experience. And I feel for those people. If you've experienced that, if you've made it to 31, congrats, you've made it. But if it's been a more difficult road there than me, then I pray for you. I pray for healing for you, because I understand that people go through trauma after trauma. There's some people who experience some traumas and then it's done, but then there are people who experience real consistent trauma from people who are supposed to love them and care for them. Maybe not people who agree with everything they do, but they're actually parents who love their kids. There are so many parents who don't love their kids. It's baffling to me, because my parents, for me and my sisters, they sacrificed so much all the time. They spent so much money and time and effort on us, and they just loved us. They spent time with us, and they actually pulled us aside and gave us values and said, here's why you can't do that. And they demonstrated it with their lives. They demonstrated Christ through their lives. They didn't just drag us to church and expect us to be, living a righteous life while they were not living a righteous life. No, they lived a righteous life. They demonstrated it to us. They demonstrated God to us so that we had an example going forward on how to live. And that was a tremendous blessing throughout my life in terms of shaping it and molding it. And it's been a true blessing beyond words. It really has. And I'm eternally grateful to them and to God for where my life has been. But that's all I've got for now. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I got a lot of happy birthday wishes on Facebook. Thank you to all those people. Just thank you to God for another year of life. May his name forever be praised. And no matter what the future brings, the future does look dark for a lot of us. I'm willing to admit that. The future looks uncertain, in America especially. It all looks crazy, and people are panicking, and things just don't look good. But just keep this in mind. If God has brought you to where you're at, don't think he's going to stop just because times in the world tend to get tough. When times get tough, just lean on him, lean on his principles, be as kind as you can be to others, learn when to say no to things that are that aren't God-honoring, that aren't righteous, and that certainly aren't true. Learn when to walk away and build meaningful relationships with people. Don't build relationships with people who aren't devoted to telling the truth or to living in the truth. Build relationships with people who are devoted to God, devoted to truth, devoted to being a good human being. So, thank you very much for watching. This has been Super Koopa, and I will see you guys next time. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.